All right. Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep today and
Diving deep
yeah,
indeed.
tackling a topic that we get asked about a lot, actually.
Hmm.
How Latter-day Saints observe the Sabbath.
The Sabbath, yeah. A fascinating one for sure.
Yeah, so to help us unpack this, we're going to be looking at a devotional by Elder Dan Hammond. And just a quick note, that's pronounced Hammond, not Hammond.
Great. Hammond.
So if you've ever wondered what Latter-day Saints actually do on the Sabbath, this is the deep dive for you. Buckle up, because we're about to get into resting, feasting, fasting, and even a little bit of mind control.
And what's really interesting is that this whole devotional is actually structured around a talk by President Joseph F. Smith,
Okay.
who was, of course, a former leader of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
Right.
And President Smith really made a point of saying that Sabbath observance, this keeping the Sabbath day holy, is for everyone, not just adults, not just, certain groups of people. It's for everyone.
So it sounds like Elder Hammond took that idea and kind of like ran with it.
Absolutely. Yeah, he lays out 5 specific activities that President Smith taught Latter-day Saints should be doing on the Sabbath.
5 specific activities.
5. First and foremost, he talks about resting from all your labors.
Okay.
And this isn't just about, sleeping in on Sunday morning.
Yeah.
It's really about giving your mind and your body a break from your everyday routine. So we're talking about, work, school, chores, anything that usually takes up your time and energy during the week.
So it's more of a conscious effort to disconnect.
Exactly. It's
Okay.
intentional. You're setting the Sabbath apart as a day of rest, a time to recharge.
Okay, so that's the first one. Resting from labors.
Right. The second is worship and prayer, which is all about focusing on your relationship with God.
So kind of like designating quality time for that relationship.
Precisely. It's about expressing your devotion to God and strengthening that connection.
Got it. So that naturally leads into the third point then, right?
It does.
Which, if I remember correctly, is about keeping your mind focused on worship even when you're not at church.
That's it. President Smith was really big on this idea of making the Sabbath distinct from the rest of the week. So it's not just about what you do during those few hours at church.
It's about the whole day.
The whole day, yeah. It's about cultivating a spirit of reverence, even in simple things.
So the entire day should have this kind of spiritual undercurrent.
Exactly. And of course, attending church meetings is part of that, especially sacrament meetings.
Right, sacrament meeting.
This is where Latter-day Saints renew covenants
Okay.
and participate in this beautiful act of confession and forgiveness. Now, I know for those who aren't familiar with these terms, it might sound a little confusing.
Sure.
Covenants are basically sacred promises made with God.
Okay.
And the sacrament is a really important ordinance using bread and water to symbolize Christ's sacrifice.
Yeah.
So during sacrament meeting, members are reflecting on their commitment to follow Christ and, their efforts to live according to those covenants they've made.
It's like a weekly check-in almost.
In a way, yeah. A time for reflection and renewal.
Okay, so we've got resting, worshiping, keeping our minds focused, attending meetings.
And last but certainly not least, fasting.
Yes, fasting. That's something that often comes up when people talk about Latter-day Saints.
It does. And essentially, it involves abstaining from food and drink for a period of time, typically 2 meals.
Okay, so no snacks either then.
Nope, no snacks. But you can prepare food for later, once the fast is over. The real focus is on strengthening your spiritual connection through prayer and reflection during that time.
And Elder Hammond really stresses the importance of fasting with a sincere heart, right?
He does, yeah. And that really struck me because it's not just about going through the motions, just skipping meals for the sake of it. It's about aligning your intentions with the purpose of the fast.
So your heart needs to be in it.
Exactly. You're intentionally choosing to abstain from physical nourishment so you can focus on spiritual nourishment instead.
That makes a lot of sense. But honestly, all of this begs the question,
So why?
why? Yeah, why all these rules and guidelines? What's the point?
Well, according to President Smith, and this is a point that Elder Hammond really dives into,
Okay.
it's all about keeping ourselves unspotted from the world.
Unspotted from the world. That's quite a phrase.
It is, and I think it speaks to this idea of, recognizing the constant barrage of information, demands, and distractions that we face every single day.
Right.
And on the Sabbath, we consciously choose to step away from all of that.
Okay.
We create a space for spiritual growth.
Huh.
We let go of worldly worries and focus on connecting with something bigger than ourselves.
So it's almost like a spiritual detox in a way.
In a way, yeah. Like hitting the reset button on your soul.
And that's got to be Well, it's got to be pretty difficult in today's world.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, our world is constantly on, there's always something vying for our attention.
Right.
So to be able to carve out that time and space for intentional disconnection, for spiritual recharging, well, it's more valuable now than ever, I think.
I totally agree. Speaking of intentional, when I first saw the phrase mind control in our outline for today,
Oh, yeah.
I got to admit I was a little thrown off.
I can imagine. It sounds a bit intense, right?
It does.
But what's really fascinating is how Elder Heyman connects this idea of mind control to actively choosing where our minds go on the Sabbath.
Okay.
Because the reality is our minds are constantly bombarded with stimuli,
Work deadlines.
work deadlines, social media, the never-ending news cycle.
Yeah.
And all of that can pull us away from spiritual things without us even realizing it.
So it's almost like we're on autopilot sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. And the Sabbath is about taking back control, making a conscious effort to focus on things that nourish our spirits.
Intentional thinking.
Exactly. It's powerful stuff. And Elder Hammond actually shares this really great story about a woman who initially struggled with Sabbath observance. She felt like it was just a list of rules, like a bunch of don'ts.
Right.
But then she shifted her perspective. She started focusing on the joy and peace that the Sabbath brought her. And it became a day of recharging and reconnecting, not just a day of restrictions.
That's such a good point. It's about finding that balance between the sacred and the secular.
Absolutely. And Elder Heyman really hammers that home. He says that ultimately the Sabbath is about joy, peace, and spiritual nourishment.
It's not about deprivation. It's about, well, like you said, rejuvenation.
Rejuvenation, exactly. It's a day set apart for spiritual growth and renewal.
Wow. It makes you think.
Doesn't it?
If the Sabbath is truly about separating ourselves from the world, even just for a day, what worldly things do we need to detach from to create that space for ourselves?
That's the question, isn't it?
That's the question. All right. Well, that's about all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us on another deep dive. And don't forget to subscribe and leave a review. We really appreciate it. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.